So now I want to introduce you a model which helps you structure your argumentation when you write a paper, when you are engaged in a debate, and also when you give a speech. So this model is very robust and has been cited more than 5,000 times in the literature. So Toulmin is a British philosopher, author, as well as educator, and that is why this work is very important in the field of argumentation. So this model has a couple of elements, starting with claim, then reasons to support the claim, evidence to support the reason, acknowledgement, which is limitation of your claim, response to acknowledgement, and also warrants, which are the accepted norms, which connects the claim to the reason. So let me talk about each of these elements one by one with one simple example. Again, the example of smoking. So if the claim is smoking should be banned, what do you think could be the possible reasons for it? So now think about the reasons and write down that reason for yourself. So for me, the most important reason is that smoking causes cancer. Of course, it could have also other type of reasons that you have in your own mind. So now it's time to bring evidence for our reason. What do you think is the right evidence? Again, think about it and write down your evidence for it. So for me, the most important evidence is that many scientific studies prove that smoking causes cancer. And of course, I have to have sources, references, citation. And the stronger the source is, the more valid your claim becomes. So think about using strong evidence sources, citations. So then what do you think are possible acknowledgement or limitation for this claim? So think about it. This is a very nice example in which you could think about the possible limitations or the percentage in which your claim is not valid. So for me, one idea is that the most important acknowledgement is that if you are 100 years old and if you have smoked for the entire life, then this claim is not valid. So this is a possible kind of acknowledgement or refutation or somehow limitation for my claim. So what is important is that you always respond to this acknowledgement because you don't want to devalue the claim, the value of your claim that you have made. Therefore, you need to always respond to acknowledgement. What do you think is the possible response to this acknowledgement? Just think about it in your mind. For me, is that if you are still 100 years old and you have smoked most of your life, but the possible acknowledgement is that maybe it just doesn't work on you. Maybe you are immune on these smoking consequences, but still it harms your surrounding and the people around you. And that is why you this way respond to the acknowledgement that you just made. So now it's time to also reflect on the warrant. Which warrant could be valid in this case? Warrant is the accepted norms that nobody disagrees with that, and it connects claim to the reason. So think about the warrants. For me, one possible warrant is that no one wants to have cancer, or people with cancer are more likely to die. So therefore, most of the time warrants are left unstated. So we do not even mention that unless we have doubt about the fact that maybe other people have different type of imaginations about the warrants. So most of the time you do not mention warrants unless necessary. So again, let me go through each of the elements of Toulmin's model with another simple example. So claim somehow is also called as a statement or proposition. And it answers this question: what do you think? What is your main claim? What is your main point? So maybe you just claim that I am a lazy teacher. So that is your claim. But of course, You need to have reasons and evidence for it. You cannot just say, I'm a lazy teacher. Maybe I am, but just bring reasons for it. It's good to know that we have some characteristics for a good claim. First of all, a good claim is engaging. So choose a claim always. For example, if you want to choose a topic for your speech, or if you want to choose a topic for your debate, or if you want to choose a topic for your master thesis, choose a topic that is engaging, that people care for, that is somehow related to the societal issues, for example, not the topic that nobody cares for. A good claim is not overly vague. So when you make a claim, it has to be very specific. For example, if you say smoking should be banned, do you mean everywhere? Do you mean in closed buildings? Do you mean in hospitals? Or do you mean in the campus? So make sure to make it as specific as possible. A good claim is logical. Of course, you have to make a claim that you can support that claim with reasons and evidence. And a good claim is debatable. So again, choose a topic for your speech, debate, and thesis that is debatable. For example, you cannot debate about the taste of Pepsi-Cola versus Coca-Cola. That's just the taste, and some people like Pepsi-Cola, some people like Coca-Cola. So again, make sure to choose a topic that is debatable. So the second element of Tolman's model is reasons. Sometimes we call them data or grounds. So when you basically break your claim into several smaller pieces, that is your reason, and it answers this question. Why do you think I am a lazy teacher? How come? What is your proof? All these kind of questions. So because in many of my classes I showed you, or I sat down on my desk and just showed you some movies that had no educational value for you, and that is why you think I am a lazy teacher. Or because I always used old tests that seem to be designed to save my time rather than to capture your knowledge. So it's another reason which makes you claim that I am a lazy teacher. If you see that, still these reasons are not yet complete, and that those reasons have to be backed up with real evidence. Do you have any evidence? Now think about the evidence. But before we move to the evidence, I'd like you to give you some example of reasoning. There are different types of reasoning. Reasoning based on analogy. For example, when you make a comparison between two or more things and conclude that what is true in this case is true in another case. Let me give you an example. Road pricing worked well in Belgium, so in Holland it should also work. So what do you think about this reasoning? Do you think it's a valid reason? Do you think something is missing? Or when you can use this type of reasoning? So just think about it for a couple of minutes and reflect on that, whether this is a good reasoning or not. So if I want to give you some answer, I would say, okay, maybe this is a good reasoning. But of course, if you make comparison between two things, those things must have some similar characteristics. Maybe in Holland, Belgium, it's okay. They are, two neighboring countries. Maybe they have the same type of car, driving culture, the same type of roads, infrastructure, etc. But you cannot make a comparison between road pricing in Holland and in Iran, my original country, because the whole driving culture is different from two countries. In Iran, people normally who are more aggressive and go faster, then they are number one, so they go faster. But here, the situation is different. We follow the rules, etc. So again, make sure that when you compare two things, they have some similar characteristics. Another type of reasoning is based on causality. So, for example, one example here is that my car is dangerous because the brakes are not working properly. So what do you think about this reasoning? Is it a valid reasoning, or do you think something is missing, or just speculate about this yourself? to me, yes, it makes sense. So the car is dangerous if the brakes are not working properly. But some people may argue that, okay, if the car is standing still, then so the car is not dangerous. But let's not go too far in details on that. So another reasoning is based on authority, rules, or person. For example, buy Elmex or Colgate because dentists advise it. This is a very interesting type of reasoning. What do you think about this reasoning? Do you think it's a good reasoning? Why or why not? Well, if I want to give my own answer to this, I would say it could be a good reasoning, but still we need a little bit more information. So normally, if you have a toothache, if you have a problem with your teeth, where do you go? So normally you go to a dentist, not to a taxi driver. So from this point of view, this is a good type of reasoning. But you need to know how many percent of dentists advise it. You need to know whether they are biased or not, whether they are getting paid based on their share or not to promote this type of toothpaste. So again, you need a little bit more information. So what kind of implication it has for our writing, for our debating, and for our speech? So if you want to make reasoning based on authority, rules, and persons, make sure to choose the person and authorities who have the right expertise, not anyone. So those who have the right expertise, background, experiences, etc., then you can use them as kind of reasoning based on authority and rules, not those who do not have expertise, not those who have a hierarchical kind of position. So expertise always comes first when you use reasoning based on authority. So another type of reasoning is based on regularity, majority. Let me give you this example. American presidents are unfaithful. Kennedy was a womanizer and so was Clinton. And some people say, so is Donald Trump. So, uh, what do you think about this? Do you think reasoning based on regularity with this example makes sense or not? Just again think about it. So to me, this reasoning does not make sense. And the reason is that now you are talking about 2 out of 44, or if you include Trump, 3 out of 45. So the sample is not adequate enough to make such reasoning. So you need to have reasoning based on regularity with enough sample. So now it's 2 out of 44, 3 out of 45, and this is not just enough. So what kind of implication it has for us? If you want to make reasoning based on regularity, make sure that you have enough sample. For example, in your experiments, when you write master thesis or bachelor thesis, then make sure to choose enough sample that could give you a reliable and valid type of findings. You cannot just use simple, small sample and generalize that to everyone. So you need to follow the rules for choosing the right sample when you want to make reasoning based on regularity or majority. There are different type of other reasonings which you could read in the study guide and the reader, and you can also search in the internet for further information on these types of reasoning. So you said I'm a lazy teacher because of that and this, and now it's time to provide us with more information, with more evidence, which we also call them backing. So anything related to the personal experiences, related to the facts, data, statistics, etc., could be used as a type of evidence that you use for yourself. This basically answers this question. How do you know you are right? How do you know that the movies that I showed you had no educational value? because some of the movies that you watched included Little Big Man and Last of the Mohicans. That's why you think I'm a lazy teacher, and those movies had no educational value. Or how do you know that the test that I designed to uh, seem to save my time rather than to capture your knowledge? Because during the two tests, you showed me some of the questions that had never been covered in the course. And then when you told me that, I said, oh, sorry, skip those questions. I won't count them in the final grade. So what does that mean? That means that even as a teacher, I did not put enough time to prepare my question. I just used tests from the previous years or from previous periods and use that in this period. So again, these are indicators and of evidence that you think I'm a lazy teacher. So next element is acknowledgement. So admission of possible counter arguments. So that basically is very important to mention the acknowledgement of the claim always. Why? If you want to give a speech, or if you are engaged in a debate, or even if you write a paper, you can use acknowledgement in the form of limitations, for example. So what is the possible acknowledgement for the fact that I'm a lazy teacher because of that and that with the evidence that you provided? So the possible acknowledgement is that it's true that half of the class named me as their favorite teacher. So how come that I'm a lazy teacher and you provide all kind of arguments and evidence for it, and now half of the class named me as their favorite teacher? And of course, that is when you need to respond to this acknowledgement, because you don't want to weaken your own claim. And the response could be like this: the same half of the class slept in the whole class every day. So maybe those half of the students who named me as their favorite teacher, they were also lazy themselves, and they liked the lazy teacher who didn't make life hard for them. So it's important that you use acknowledgement always when you write a paper, when you are engaged in a debate, and when you give speech, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it takes away the chance of other party to attack you on the possible limitation and acknowledgement. Second, it makes you be prepared for the possible responses, because you know about this acknowledgement and you are prepared to respond to that acknowledgement. And the third and the most important one is that when you use these acknowledgements, basically you somehow increase your ethos and patho aspects, because you put yourself on the shoes of other party and you try to basically think about their own mind, their own point of view. And of course, again, as I said, you should never mention acknowledgement without response. Whenever you use acknowledgement, you should response. Even if you write a paper in the form of limitation, you should respond to that. For example, in this paper, we used only qualitative data, but research has shown that quantitative data is also important. Therefore, future research should focus on exploring this issue with both quantitative and qualitative data to see to what extent there is a differences between this data. So again, these acknowledgement and response are very important. And the last part of the Tolman's model is the warrants. As I said, warrants are theoretical laws, rules, and accepted norms and definitions, and nobody disagrees on that. It connects the claim with the reasons or the grounds. So, and it answers this question: what am I assuming? I assume that teachers have to be engaged, attentive, and hardworking. Or I assume that teachers should test the students only based on what is covered in the classroom. So these are possible warrants for the claim that I made. So let me summarize that. When you want to prepare an argumentation, first of all, it's important to mention your claim or proposition or a statement. Then you need to bring reasons and evidence to support your claim. Then you need to bring acknowledgement or possible limitation for your claim. Then, of course, the most important is that you object and respond to this acknowledgement. Then some people say, okay, shall we use the strongest kind of arguments, or shall we use many but small type of arguments? That, I would say, depends on the situation. Sometimes in the heat of a debate, for example, you might use one strong argument. Sometimes you might list a couple of small arguments. That depends on the situation, and sometimes people even use this in a trick and wait for the right moment to bring one of the most important arguments. So that depends on the situation. What is important is that you structure the entire argumentation. So if you are engaged in a debate or you want to give a speech, it's important to use this sequencing word. For example, this is my claim. I have a couple of reasons and evidence to support my claim. The reasons are like this: first, second, third, fourth, last but not least. Then the evidences are like this, this. And of course, you can also use this structure very consistently in your work. For example, you should never use first and then secondly, or firstly and then second. Be consistent: first, second, third, or firstly, secondly, thirdly, etc. So start with conclusion or end with conclusion. That depends again on the situation. Sometimes, for example, if you want to make a claim about people become vegetarian, you might start with the misery that animals go through, and then ask people to become vegetarian. Sometimes you might start with this type of nutritional value of vegetarian food and then ask people to become vegetarian. Again, that depends on the situation and on your own style. So, and it is important that at the end of your talk, during the speech, during the debate, that you summarize your argumentation. I'm not saying that you should repeat all the arguments, but summarize with a nice sentence, because this last sentence is the most important part, which will be remembered by the audience. So make sure to have a nice strategy for the end part of your talk during the debate and during the writing, during the speech. And of course, in the writing, it's also important that you make a good conclusion. So make sure to include that in your own works. And practice, practice, and practice. So sometimes for a kind of speech that I'm going to give in a conference, I practice for 50 times. And that is fine, because I want everything to be organized. I want to repeat. I want to learn from my mistakes. And practice makes perfect. So please practice your speech in front of the mirror for yourself, or in front of some of your family members, to learn from your mistake. As Dutch people say, oefening baart kunst. Practice makes perfect. And to end with this part, it's good to just show you this video clip, which is fun but has no educational value for you.